Chapter 4. Under the Library. It didn't take much for Oliver to convince his parents to let him leave the house on Saturday. He was up before the sun was to finish his morning duties along with Dad, and the barley harvest was already over, so their field was empty. The truck had arrived to take the produce away last week, so there wasn't much to do. Oliver put some food, water, and his school supplies into his backpack, then trekked down the road to Rory's place. While he was walking, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a number he didn't recognize. "It's Selina," read the screen. "Is this the right number?" Oliver's suspicions were immediately aroused, but he thought about it, and he figured if he was in any kind of danger, it wouldn't come from his phone. He texted back, "Yeah, it's me. Can you and Rory meet us in front of the library on 13th Street? That was right on the edge of the downtown area. Maybe one of Rory's older brothers could give them a lift if they were home." He texted her back, "Sure, we'll be there soon," and then he looked up and saw Rory's house coming up on his left. Rory was sitting in one of the rocking chairs on the front porch of his family's two-story residence. Oliver waved at him, and he jumped up and raced down the porch steps to meet his friend as he stopped at the end of the driveway. "Selina texted me," he said breathlessly. He had a large grin on his face. Oliver held up his phone. "Me too," he said. Rory's grin vanished, but it came back soon as he examined Ollie's screen. "Looks like she texted me first," he said. Oliver felt an unfamiliar twinge in his gut. "Well, are you good to meet her today?" he asked. Rory nodded. "Yeah. Did she say who else was going to be there?" Oliver shook his head. "She just said us, so probably Marcel will be there. No idea if that's it. Can one of your brothers give us a ride?" "They're not home today," said Rory, "but Mom said she can do it." Annabelle was over at a friend's house, which was good, because Oliver and Rory both agreed that she would not have been allowed to go with them today, and explaining that to her would have been unpleasant, and Rory's mom would have guilted them into taking her with them before she would have agreed to give them a ride. The walk that would have taken more than 2 hours took less than 10 minutes by car. Rory's mom was always happy to see Oliver, and treated him as another of her boys. It was like that between their families. Both boys always welcome to just walk into the other's home. Rory's dad wasn't thrilled about that, but with his two oldest sons both about to be 18, their place had been a revolving door for local teens for years now, and he put up with it when he had to. They did their best to make small talk with Rory's mom while she drove them to the library. They told her they were studying for a math test, and she went on for most of the drive about her struggles with higher learning, which surprised neither of them. The library was the oldest building in Heaford, having been built in the early 1900s, and it had been renovated repeatedly since then. The kids in school often joked that the librarian, a young adult woman named Miss Turner, lived there with several others who helped her keep it organized. Oliver had never talked to her, but Rory had once said that he found her attractive. This didn't really surprise anyone, Oliver least of all, because she was breathing and had a pulse. Regardless, she dressed in loose clothing and seemed to blend into the old-timey surroundings of the ancient, mostly wooden building. The dated metal shelving had been added a few decades ago to contain the ever-growing collection of dusty books. The paper, metal, and wood combination gave the whole place a smell just as strange yet unremarkable as the sight of it all. After they were dropped off in front of the library, they looked around for Selina, but they didn't see her until they entered the lobby. She was waiting for them, next to the front desk, and when they walked in, she reached over and rang the bell for service. Oliver was about to call out to her, but Miss Turner appeared out of the back as if she'd been listening for the ding. She looked much the same as she usually did. Blonde hair in a tight bun, glasses on the end of her nose, and her proper librarian sweater, button-down shirt, and plaid skirt giving her a much younger look than she likely was. She picked up a clipboard, checked something on it, then looked up at the two boys over the rims of her glasses. "This way, gentlemen," said Miss Turner, turning on her heel and heading back through the swinging door behind her desk. Her high heels clacked on the hardwood floor as she went. Oliver and Rory both looked at each other, then at Selina. Her face was unreadable, but Oliver began to feel the affection coming from her just like before. As it had at the cafe, it threatened to overwhelm him, but he took a deep breath and mentally powered through it. As if she could sense his resistance, she broke eye contact with him and gestured for them to follow her. Rory looked like he wanted to say something to her, but even he was too nervous to blabber. Selina and Miss Turner led the two boys back through the swinging door and into an old creaky elevator, the kind that still had the cage-type door they had to shut to operate it. They went down about 1.5 stories, not up like Oliver thought they would go, and when the door opened, they were looking at some kind of underground tunnel system comprised of carved dark blue stone. The long, wide hallway in front of them went down so far that Oliver wondered if they would actually still be underneath the library if they went the full length of it. But then Miss Turner disappeared off to the left, into a narrow accessway carved into the wall that functioned as a door. From within, Oliver saw the white glow of a ceiling light, which looked very out of place compared to the dim blueness of the hallway. "Mr. Henderson," she called, beckoning the boy in. Oliver and Rory gave one another a second look, and they discovered that Marcel was now amongst them. Rory jumped at seeing him. "Dude, how'd you get here?" he asked. "Hurry up, Henderson," said Selina, sounding like she was none too happy to be here. "She's waiting for you." Rory collected himself, nodded, and followed Miss Turner into the small room. Before they shut the door from the inside, Oliver saw that it was seemingly a normal carpeted conference room with a table, chairs, and filing cabinets. Once the door was closed, Oliver could hear nothing of what happened inside. "What is this place?" he asked his two companions. Selina looked questioningly at Marcel, who shrugged and nodded. "We call it the Cathedral." "We?" "Well, it's complicated," she admitted. "This is technically only my second time here. I don't know my way around it all yet. Marcel does, though." Oliver looked at Marcel, who nodded in agreement and spoke with his hands. "He lives here," Selina translated. "When did you learn ASL?" asked Oliver. I didn't really learn it," Selina confessed. "I can understand it through... well, you'll see." "See what?" "When Miss Turner's ready for you." "Who is she?" Marcel made more shapes. "She's his... well, I guess you'd call her his master. He calls her Dominus." "That sounds very... Catholic." "Technically, I guess it is. There's a reason for that." "Which is...
Latin?"
"That tells me nothing." She was silent for a moment, like a cloud had suddenly come over her. Oliver sensed her affection dim. She sighed. "I want you to know it all, I really do, but..." He waited. Marcel looked at Selina with compassion in his eyes. "I'm jumping back into something I wanted to leave behind for good. You and Rory and cute little Annabelle were the ones who I thought would be my anchor. And now here you are." She sounded like she was about to cry. Oliver reached out impulsively to hug her, but she stiffened up and shook her head. "I'm okay," she said. "I'll be okay." After a few minutes of standing in silence, the door opened, and Rory exited the room. He looked kind of shaken, but he put on his smile when he saw the others. "I got an A," he grinned. "On the nerd test, maybe," Oliver chuckled. "Bro, you have no idea," Rory told him, patting him on the shoulder. Miss Turner's call came from inside the room. "Mr. Byrne?" Oliver looked once more at Selina, and she beckoned him to go in with a sad smile. When he entered the room, the door shut behind him, and he was inside a small, snug, office-style room, with brown faux wood, veneer, and basic furniture. A row of cabinets intruded into the room on one wall, and a small television screen hung from the other, with the mandatory filing cabinet in one corner and a small table and chairs in the middle. On the table was an overturned clipboard next to a small metal cylindrical object that had designs carved into it. Oliver took a seat in the rolling swivel chair that Miss Turner directed him to, and she went over to the filing cabinet to swap folders. Oliver saw Henderson on the label of the one she put back, and his own last name on the one she drew forth. When she sat down, Oliver noticed the device in her hands, like the fancy Palm Pilot. Somehow it made sense for something outdated like that to be here, but he figured there was more to it than he knew. "How are you today, Oliver?" Miss Turner asked. Her voice was smooth and calming. She was much more attractive up close than Oliver had given her credit for, about halfway between young mother and big sister, all wrapped up in a nicely shaped, overly organized librarian package. Her bright, curious blue eyes shone forth from behind her thick-rimmed glasses. "I'm fine, Miss Turner," he managed after clearing a frog in his throat. "Good to hear it," she replied with a warm smile. "Do you have any questions before we begin?" "Yeah. What are we beginning?" She smiled a coy half-smile and said, "I'll explain as we go." She took out the Palm Pilot-style device and pressed a few buttons. then laid it on the table, pointing at him. "Please hold still. It's going to scan you," she told him. "I am testing you for a potential." "What's a potential?" he asked as the blue light flickered on him. He held himself in position as Miss Turner answered his question. "Have you ever heard of the Vigor?" "No." "The Vigor is a permeating energy field that exists in all forms of matter currently known to science. It is nearly undetectable except by those who can feel it naturally. Most people are born with either the ability to feel the Vigor or are no-vigs, people who cannot interact with it in a conscious way." "So what's a potential?" "Each person who uses the Vigor is called a practitioner, and each practitioner chooses one of the potentials to work with. Most people are naturally gifted toward one of the potentials, but every potential can be learned and trained by virtually any practitioner with enough willpower or strength." The device completed its scan and chimed a friendly sound. "Are you testing me for the Vigor?" Oliver asked her. She nodded and smiled. "Yep." "Do I have it?" Miss Turner sat down and pulled a pen from the bun of her hair and the clipboard from the table. "Before I tell you, I need you to answer a few questions. Think of it like a survey to determine where we go from here." In the back of his mind, Oliver hoped that on the other side of this would be an explanation for why one of his classmates had tried to kill him, but he figured Miss Turner knew what she was doing. "Okay, shoot." Her pen clicked and went to the paper on the clipboard, a series of check boxes. "I'm going to say a list of seemingly random words that are all related to the topic we are currently discussing. If any of them sound familiar to you, I want you to tell me everything you know about them, all right?" "Got it." The list of words was indeed very random. At first, they all seemed to start with the letter V. Veros, vice, vigilance, venators. "Wait, that one," he said, stopping her. "Venators?" "Yeah, when the girl from my class attacked me." "You're referring to the assault at the cafe yesterday?" "Yeah," he said, assuming Selena and Marcel must have told her about it. "She was on top of me and she whispered that the venators said hello, and then she called me a heretic." The pen scribbled notes on the clipboard. "Did she say anything else?" Oliver thought back, then remembered something else about the words he'd heard. "She called Selena and Marcel Veros scum, and then she disappeared." Miss Turner nodded, as though what he was telling her fit with previous reports, and she continued writing. He was glad someone was taking it seriously. "Thank you, Oliver. Let's continue." "But we'll get there, I promise," she said. Her voice was very soothing. "But we need to finish this first." The next several words were ones he knew, but in this context they made no sense. Might, valor, pain, fury. Then they switched to a series of colors: blue, green, yellow, red, black. After that, the words didn't sound like words anymore. Bairu, Grendu, Yindir, Razir. "That's not English, is it?" he asked. She shook her head and continued, this time using words that sounded like ranks of some kind. Adept, Dominus. He told her that Selena had mentioned that Marcel called Miss Turner Dominus. "Am I supposed to call you that?" he asked her. She chuckled and seemed almost his age when she did it. "No, I don't think so. At least, not right now." She continued with more ranking words. Paladin, champion, elder, cathedral, sanctuary. Other than what he'd already learned, he knew nothing special about those words other than his former days playing D&D with his friends. The words after that sounded like the strange non-English ones from before. Tyche, Bellator, Kaidat, Ditheri, Apostata. That last one sounds Catholic, like Sanctuary and Dominus. Miss Turner smiled. "Sounds like someone studied his Latin. We're almost done." 4 more words. Otheroi, Mendrin, Gelbos, and finally Tempus Illud. "That last one has something to do with time," he guessed. "Correct. Those are all the words I have. Last test." She picked up the cylindrical object from the table. It was just a little shorter than Oliver's forearm, and it was heavier than it looked. "Please stand up, and make sure nothing is in the way when you press the button," said Miss Turner. The device fit very comfortably into the palm of his hand, and his fingers closed naturally around it. His thumb found the button easily, and he made sure to point it away from himself and the other person in the room with him. The snap hiss of the bladed weapon startled him, and his eyes were wide in amazement. He had seen the pointed cylindrical blade extend from the handle, thick at the bottom and tapering off to a sharp spear-like point at the tip. It had extended just a split second before the glow of the energy portion had emerged with its heat-like sound, the hiss quieting down almost musically. It made no sound, but the light flickered and cast brilliant shadows on the wall. The color was a brilliant, bright white. "I see," said Miss Turner, eagerly writing down her observations on her clipboard. "What is this thing?" asked Oliver in awe. "That is a bright blade," she told him, still writing. "Only people who can connect to the vigor are capable of making that energy sheath around the metal portion. Yours is quite bright. Brighter than my own adept's, in fact." "Your adept?" "Marcel, you've met." "So you're his trainer?" "Yes. And it seems that now I will be one of yours also. You can shut it off now." Oliver pressed the button again, and an almost reverse-sounding hiss-snapping noise rang in his ears as the light and shadows vanished. The room looked darker with the absence of the incredible brightness, and he saw weirdly shaped spots from looking at the core of the weapon. "Thank you, Mr. Byrne. You can step out. I have to make a call, and I'll be with you all shortly. Tell Marcel that I will meet all of you in the training room."